Humanity extended its hand in peace, and the galaxy laughed. The Triarchy of Velos, the self-proclaimed rulers of the Orion Arm, scoffed at the proposal as if it were a joke told at the expense of lesser beings. Adrian Voss stood before their ruling council, watching their sneering faces as he laid out the terms. Humanity would not demand tribute. It would not impose governance. It merely sought cooperation, a unified front against the lawless chaos that defined galactic politics. The response was swift. One of the warlords, a towering brute with violet skin and sunken eyes, stood and spat onto the table between them. "You offer peace as if we are equals," the creature growled, its voice thick with contempt. "Humanity is nothing more than a transient species clawing for relevance in a cosmos that does not care." Others laughed, a cacophony of hissing, barking, and guttural amusement. Voss remained silent, his expression unreadable as the warlords reveled in their own arrogance. He had expected resistance, anticipated doubt, but what followed was not mere rejection, it was a declaration. The council chamber doors burst open, and Triarchy soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. Voss did not flinch. He had come alone, as a sign of good faith. Now, that faith was rewarded with betrayal. The warlord smirked, raising a clawed hand. "You will serve as a message to your kind," he said. "Let Earth know that weakness has no place in this galaxy." Voss only nodded. "You've just made the worst mistake in your species' history." They did not kill him outright. They wanted him to suffer, to be paraded like a captured beast. They shackled his wrists in cold iron, forced him to his knees before a roaring crowd. An arena. A spectacle. The warlord stepped forward, raising a blade forged from some alien metal. "A human dies today," he bellowed, and the crowd erupted in deafening approval. The blade descended, but it never reached its mark. In the blink of an eye, Voss moved. His bonds shattered like brittle glass. His hands found the warlord's throat. The massive alien staggered back, clawing at the vice-like grip, crushing its windpipe. Panic spread through the crowd as the execution turned into an impossible reversal. Voss's knee drove into the warlord's ribs, splintering them with a sickening crunch. A single, ruthless twist of his wrist silenced the creature forever. The silence was deafening. The soldiers hesitated. It was all he needed. Voss lunged forward, disarming one with a brutal strike to the throat, pivoting the stolen weapon in a precise arc. Beams of energy ripped through the remaining guards before they could react. He moved like a specter of death, each movement calculated, efficient. Within moments, the execution squad lay in ruin. The crowd erupted into chaos, fear overtaking arrogance. He turned toward them, raising the fallen warlord's severed head in one hand. "This is what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness," he growled. He could have killed more. He could have let the rage consume him. Instead, he activated the beacon embedded beneath his skin. A signal. A single pulse. They would come for him now. Minutes later, the sky above the capital city darkened. Not with clouds, not with nightfall, but with warships. Thousands. The Triarchy had expected war to be waged in years, in prolonged sieges. They had underestimated human efficiency. The Soul Accord had anticipated betrayal. The Fury Protocol had already been set in motion. Earth's greatest fleet had been waiting beyond the system's edge, ready to strike. The moment they detected the distress beacon, the order was given. The first wave descended. Shock troops and exorigs touched down in the streets, weapons carving through resistance like a scythe through grass. Triarchy soldiers fell by the thousands, unable to react, unable to retreat. What was once a proud capital became a war zone within minutes. Voss strode through the battlefield, the chaos swirling around him like a living thing. His comlink crackled. "Adrian," a voice called. "General Kern," his second-in-command. "We've secured the outer districts. Resistance is crumbling." He pressed a bloodied hand to his earpiece. "Burn the spires," he ordered. "Topple their banners. Let them see what it means to defy us." Explosions punctuated his words, fire climbing toward the sky. In the distance, the Triarchy Palace stood, once a symbol of power. Now, it would be the stage for their final reckoning. Inside, the ruling council cowered. They had laughed once. Now, they begged. "We can negotiate," one stammered. "We acted in haste," another whimpered. Voss's eyes, cold and unreadable, swept over them. He stepped forward, boots echoing against marble. "Negotiation was offered," he said. "You rejected it. Now, you learn the price of arrogance." He lifted his weapon, a sleek pistol crafted for execution. One by one, he delivered judgment. No pleas. No mercy. When the last warlord fell, he turned to his soldiers. "Secure the broadcast network," he commanded. Within moments, the faces of every remaining Triarchy leader flickered onto screens across the system. Bloodied, defeated, kneeling. Voss spoke, his voice reaching billions. "This war was never necessary," he declared. "But now, it is over. The Triarchy is no more. You serve the Soul Accord now. Disobey, and you will share their fate." As his fleet moved to occupy the remaining strongholds, Voss stood on the balcony of the burning palace, watching as the banners of the old regime were torn down. The galaxy had chosen war. Humanity had answered. And from this moment forward, no one would ever mistake their kindness for weakness again. The fires of conquest burned across the once proud capital of Velos Prime. Black smoke choked the sky, the ruins of the Triarchy's arrogance laid bare for all to see. The banners that once bore the sigil of their dominion had been torn down, trampled beneath the boots of human soldiers. The screams of the dying echoed through shattered streets, mingling with the roar of warships as they carved through the last remnants of enemy resistance. Humanity had come in peace. Now, it came in fury. Adrian Voss walked through the wreckage with the precision of a predator, his steps unhurried, unwavering. The scent of scorched flesh clung to the air, the bodies of Triarchy soldiers littering the ground. Those who had not fled or surrendered lay in twisted heaps, their weapons useless against the storm that had descended upon them. The battle had not lasted long. It had never been a question of if humanity would win, only how quickly. The Aegis Armada had cut through enemy defenses like a blade through soft flesh, leaving nothing but death in its wake. Kern's voice crackled through his comlink. "We've secured the palace perimeter. The last of their command structure is inside, but they've locked down the gates. Heavily reinforced, sir." Voss tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Then break them." A pause. "Understood." Seconds later, the air shook as a directed kinetic charge tore through the palace gates, the explosion sending molten debris cascading through the halls. The Triarchy's last bastion had been breached. Voss stepped through the shattered entrance, his rifle held low, his stance relaxed. Inside, the remaining warlords of the Triarchy huddled together like cornered animals. Their ornate robes were smeared with ashen blood, their expressions shifting between defiance and desperation. Some reached for weapons, but the human soldiers who flanked Voss raised theirs in response. The meaning was clear. There would be no fight. Only a reckoning. One of them, a hulking brute with iridescent scales, stepped forward, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. You have proven your strength, human. We underestimated you." His gaze flickered to the bodies of his fallen guards. "But this does not have to be the end. We can find terms." Voss cut him off with a slow shake of his head. "Terms were offered. You spat on them. You thought us weak, thought we would accept subjugation. Now, you beg because you see the truth." Another warlord snarled, baring jagged teeth. "You think this ends here? You think your kind will rule unchallenged?" His hands clenched into fists. "You are one species. The galaxy is vast. It will never bow to you." Voss stepped closer, his presence suffocating, his voice edged with cold amusement. "The galaxy doesn't need to bow. It only needs to fear." With practiced ease, he raised his sidearm and put a round through the alien's skull. The body crumpled, lifeless. The others flinched but did not move. Silence hung over the chamber, thick and oppressive. The remaining warlords knew there was no escape, no salvation. They had seen their fleets shattered, their armies slaughtered. Their homeworld burned around them. They had ruled through intimidation, through the certainty that none could challenge their might. Now, they faced something far worse. They faced extinction at the hands of those they had once mocked. Voss turned to his men. Get them on their knees. The soldiers moved without hesitation, forcing the remaining warlords down, their hands bound behind them. Their dignity stripped away, reduced to nothing more than the remnants of a fallen empire. Voss activated his comlink. Begin the broadcast. Across the conquered worlds of the Triarchy, on every remaining operational transmission network, the image flickered to life. The last of the Triarchy's rulers, kneeling in disgrace before their human conquerors. Voss faced the camera, his voice steady, absolute. This war was unnecessary. We came in peace. We offered unity. We extended a hand of diplomacy. And you, the leaders of the Triarchy, answered with bloodshed, believing humanity to be weak. You sought to crush us before we could rise. You failed. He let the words settle, the weight of them undeniable. Your fleets are gone. Your armies are dust. Your homeworld is ours. The Triarchy no longer exists. From this moment forward, all who remain will serve the Soul Accord. One of the warlords spat at his feet. You think the people will accept this? His voice rasped. You think they will submit without resistance? Voss met his gaze, unfazed. They will because they have no choice. A flick of his fingers, a silent command. The soldiers raised their weapons. Gunfire filled the chamber. The warlords fell, their bodies hitting the floor in unison. The broadcast ended. Kern's voice returned over the comms. It's done. The message is spreading across the conquered systems. Resistance is collapsing. Voss exhaled slowly, turning toward the shattered remnants of the palace. Then we move forward. He stepped over the bodies, making his way outside, where the night sky was filled with the glow of human warships holding position over a broken world. His soldiers stood at attention as he passed, their faces unreadable, their movements precise. They had won, but there was no celebration. There was no need. This was not a victory. It was a lesson. One the galaxy would never forget. The war had begun with an offer of peace. It had ended with fire and blood. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time. The air still crackled with the aftershocks of battle, the scent of scorched metal and burning flesh hanging thick in the ruins of Velos Prime. The city that once stood as the beating heart of the Triarchy now lay broken beneath the boots of its conquerors. Smoke billowed from the shattered spires, rising into a sky darkened not by night but by the looming presence of Earth's fleet. The war was won, the enemy crushed, yet Adrian Voss knew this was not the end. The galaxy did not operate on the principles of mercy. Neither did he. Kern's voice came through the comm, crisp and efficient. Resistance has been fully neutralized. All military outposts, planetary defense grids, and strongholds have been taken. The last of their ships have either surrendered or been destroyed. We have complete control. Voss processed the report with cold precision, his mind already turning toward the next step. Civilian response? There was a pause. Kern was choosing his words carefully. Pockets of unrest. Riots in the outer districts. Some attempting to flee off-world, but our orbital blockades are holding. They know there's nowhere to run. Voss exhaled, gaze sweeping over the ruined skyline. Enforce curfews. Establish martial law. Any remaining Triarchy sympathizers who resist, execute them publicly. Make an example of the first 100. The rest will fall in line. A sharp acknowledgement from Kern, no hesitation, no argument. There was nothing left to argue. The message had to be absolute. Humanity did not take prisoners. It took control. He moved through the remains of the palace, past corridors stained with the blood of rulers who had once commanded the fate of entire systems. Their fate had been sealed the moment they rejected Earth's offer of peace. Now, their empire was nothing more than history. He entered the central war chamber, where his officers stood gathered around the tactical display, triarchy systems blinking red as their worlds fell one by one. The war had ended with such brutal efficiency that the enemy's outer colonies had surrendered before Earth's fleet even arrived. Fear had done most of the work for them. General Yara Raines turned as he approached, her expression unreadable. "We're receiving transmissions from multiple factions. Some neutral empires are calling for negotiations, others are declaring us a threat to galactic stability." A thin smirk ghosted across her lips. "Most are just waiting to see if we bleed." Voss did not smile. "Then we do not give them the satisfaction." He turned to the display, tapping into the system-wide relay. The feed flickered, showing a dozen different leaders from various alien species, some anxious, others furious. One, a scaled diplomat from the SCI-FI syndicate, leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of barely restrained panic. This conquest will not stand. You have upset the balance of power. Your actions are reckless. Unchecked aggression of this scale will unite the galaxy against you." Voss let the words settle before speaking, his tone even, measured. "Unchecked aggression is what led us here. We offered peace. The Triarchy spat in our face. We responded accordingly." He stepped forward, his presence filling the space. "Do not mistake this for mere conquest. This is a correction. An example of what happens when humanity's mercy is mistaken for weakness." The SCI-FI diplomat bristled. "You cannot expect to hold an empire through fear alone." "History," Voss cut him off. "History is written by those who survive." His gaze swept over the assembled leaders. "You will all make a choice. You can resist, and suffer the same fate as the Triarchy. Or you can accept the new order and live. That is the only negotiation I will entertain." A silence stretched between them, heavy and absolute. Some would fight. He expected that. But the majority would comply, if only to preserve their own existence. That was all that mattered. The feed cut off, leaving only the quiet hum of the war chamber. Kern folded his arms, nodding toward the map. "So what's next? Occupation?" Voss studied the data, the fractured remains of the galaxy trembling under Earth's shadow. "No," he said, voice final. "Annexation." The transition was swift. What had once been the Triarchy became an extension of the Soul Accord, its systems placed under human governance, its people integrated, or eradicated if they resisted. Military outposts were converted into command stations. Loyalists were identified and given roles to oversee planetary affairs. The rest were either imprisoned or executed. The banners of the old empire were burned, replaced with the sigil of humanity's dominion. Entire sectors were placed under AI surveillance, their communications monitored, their resources funneled directly into Earth's growing war machine. In the weeks that followed, the message spread across the stars. Some worlds swore allegiance immediately, eager to avoid the fate of Velos Prime. Others hesitated, but hesitation would not save them. One by one, dissenting factions fell, their leaders either assimilated or destroyed. There was no rebellion, only brief, futile struggles that ended the same way. Humanity did not allow second chances. Voss stood aboard the command deck of the Iron Dominion, Earth's new flagship, watching as the latest conquest was finalized. The reports were clear. The last remnants of the Triarchy's influence had been erased. The galaxy was learning its lesson. And yet, he knew this was only the beginning. War had a way of spreading like wildfire, of drawing out those who believed they could fight against the inevitable. He would be ready for them. A transmission request came through, marked urgent. Voss accepted it, and a familiar face appeared on the holoscreen, High Chancellor Enith of the Valkyrie Union, one of the few remaining sovereign rulers who had yet to bend the knee. Her expression was one of thinly veiled defiance, her golden eyes sharp with calculated resolve. Supreme Commander Voss, she greeted, her tone betraying nothing. I see you've done what many thought impossible. Voss regarded her coolly. You did not call to offer pleasantries. Enith's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. No. I called to offer a warning. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, allowing her to continue. You have conquered a great empire, she said. But conquest is only the beginning. The true test is what follows. She leaned forward slightly. The galaxy will not sit idle forever. Even now, there are those who whisper in the shadows, who seek to unite under a common cause. A pause. They will come for you. Voss did not so much as blink. Let them. Enith studied him for a long moment, then exhaled, as if she had expected nothing else. Very well, she murmured. Then may the stars watch over us all. The transmission ended. For the first time in a long while, Voss allowed himself a moment of contemplation. She was not wrong. There would be more battles, more wars. The galaxy would not bow so easily. But that was fine. He had never expected peace. Peace was an illusion, a fleeting moment between conflicts. He had accepted that long ago. Kern approached, his expression unreadable. Another problem? Voss shook his head. No, he said. Just another inevitability. He turned back to the viewport, watching as the endless stretch of space loomed before him. He did not fear what was coming. He welcomed it. Humanity had risen. And it would never fall. The galaxy trembled beneath the weight of its new masters. Where once the triarchy of Velos had ruled with unchecked arrogance, now the banners of humanity flew over its shattered remains. Planets that had once stood as symbols of alien supremacy now bore the mark of the Soul Accord, their people forced to swear fealty or perish in the fires of resistance. There was no middle ground. No negotiations. No second chances. Humanity had not come to ask for obedience, it had come to take it. Adrian Voss stood aboard the Iron Dominion, the bridge bathed in the cold glow of tactical displays charting the expansion of Earth's dominion. Every world taken was another node in the vast network of control being woven across the Orion Arm. Reports streamed in, fortified garrisons established, AI sentinels deployed, industrial centers repurposed for war production. The remnants of the Triarchy's fleet had either been dismantled or absorbed, their technology reverse-engineered to strengthen humanity's growing war machine. The campaign had been executed with such brutal precision that most remaining factions had surrendered before a single shot was fired. Fear was a powerful tool. Kern approached, data slate in hand. The last of the Triarchy's central databases have been decrypted. We now have full access to their intelligence archives. Every fleet manifest, every supply chain, every classified project. We know where the bodies are buried. He placed the slate on the command table, his expression impassive. There's something else. A directive hidden deep in their war protocols. A failsafe. Voss raised an eyebrow, fingers tapping against the cold steel of the table. Explain. Kern pulled up the translated text, the alien script converting into sharp, human characters. Project Leviathan. A contingency plan in the event of total collapse. The Triarchy knew they might lose. If it ever came to that, they were prepared to unleash something catastrophic. Voss leaned in, scanning the details with meticulous focus. The information was fragmented, but the implications were clear. The Triarchy had not simply hoarded resources for their war effort. They had been building something in the shadows, something far more dangerous than mere battleships or planetary defenses. A last resort. A weapon that could tip the balance if humanity had not struck first. A silent pause filled the chamber before Voss straightened, his voice like iron. Where is it? Kern's jaw tightened. Coordinates trace back to a black site in the Haraxis expanse. Off the books, hidden from conventional star maps. If there's anything left of this project, it's there. Voss did not hesitate. Prepare a strike team. We're going in. The mission was set within hours. No fleet movements. No grand displays of force. Just a single warship, its stealth systems engaged as it slipped through the void. Voss led the operation personally, Kern at his side along with a squad of elite operators bred for precision warfare. The journey to Haraxis was uneventful, the system itself little more than a dying star surrounded by barren, lifeless worlds. It was the perfect hiding place for something meant to stay buried. The facility loomed in the darkness, an obsidian construct carved into the heart of a dead moon. Scanners detected no activity, no life signs. The Triarchy had either abandoned it or left it to rot. Voss didn't believe in coincidences. He ordered a breach. They moved through the corridors like wraiths, weapons raised, senses sharp. The station was eerily silent, its systems still active but devoid of personnel. Consoles flickered with fragmented data, security feeds showing nothing but empty halls. Then they found it. The central chamber. A massive containment vault reinforced with layers of energy shielding. The doors had been breached from the inside. Something had escaped. Kern moved to one of the consoles, his fingers working quickly. The last logs came to life, a garbled recording filled with desperate alien voices. Static. Screams. A phrase repeated over and over in the Triarchy tongue. The translator struggled, then converted the words into human speech. We could not control it. It is awake. It is coming. The lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the walls. Then the alarms blared. Movement. Voss turned sharply, signaling his team to form up. Shadows shifted beyond the corridors, shapes barely visible against the dim emergency lights. The air grew thick, charged with something unnatural. The security systems had failed not because the facility was abandoned, but because whatever had been locked away here had taken control. A guttural voice slithered through the comms, distorting the frequency, bending it into something wrong. You are not the architects of this war. The words were layered, inhuman, filled with something deeper than language itself. You are merely the next to fall. The walls pulsed. Organic. Breathing. Then the darkness moved. The first soldier died before he could react, his body yanked into the ceiling, torn apart with an unseen force. The second was lifted off his feet, his screams cut short as his armor caved inward, crushed by something unseen. Gunfire erupted, the corridors flashing with muzzle flares, but the bullets struck nothing. Or perhaps they passed through something that was never truly there. Kern cursed, yanking Voss behind cover. This isn't a weapon, he snarled. It's something they found. Something they couldn't control. Voss's mind worked quickly, piecing together the implications. The Triarchy had always operated on power, on conquest. If they had built a failsafe, it would have been something mechanical, something they could wield. This was something else entirely. Another soldier collapsed, his eyes black, mouth open in a silent scream, veins pulsing with something alien. The squad's weapons were useless. This was not a fight they could win through conventional means. Voss knew when to press forward. And he knew when to cut his losses. Fall back, he barked, activating his comm Kern, get us an evac, now. The squad moved with precision, retreating through the collapsing corridors as the station itself seemed to writhe around them. The very walls twisted, reshaping, as if they were inside something that was alive. The thing in the darkness whispered. It knew them. It called them by name. One by one. Faster, Kern growled, dragging a wounded soldier toward the exit as the flickering lights cast monstrous silhouettes along the walls. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers stopped. The alarms died. The air was still. They reached the extraction point, the warship's engines roaring as it powered up for immediate departure. The moment the last soldier was aboard, Voss slammed his fist against the emergency lock. Go! Now! The ship ascended, breaking free from the station's gravitational pull just as the moon itself began to fracture. From orbit, they watched as the surface cracked like shattered glass, something massive shifting beneath the crust. Something that should have never been disturbed. Kern exhaled, eyes locked on the view. What the hell did they unleash? Voss did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on the crumbling remains of the station. The Triarchy had not just been fighting for power. They had been running from something. Something older. Something hungry. And now it was awake. He turned sharply. Prepare a full planetary lockdown. No one gets in. No one gets out. Kern hesitated. Sir, if that thing. Voss's voice was steel. If it tries to leave? He met Kern's eyes. We glassed the entire system. No hesitation. No argument. This war had begun with fire. It would end the same way. The war should have ended with fire. It should have ended with the Triarchy's empire burned to nothing, its leaders dead, its systems annexed under the Soul Accord's dominion. But Adrian Voss now knew the truth. The Triarchy had never feared humanity. They had feared something else. Something they had tried to bury in the depths of the Haraxis expanse. Something they had hoped to keep locked away at any cost. And now, because of them, it was awake. Kern's voice cut through the silence, sharp and urgent. Orbital scans just updated. The seismic activity on Haraxis Prime isn't stopping. It's increasing. The moon's crust is destabilizing. His fingers tapped rapidly against the hollow interface, pulling up distorted data feeds. We're detecting. I don't even know how to classify this. Energy signatures are erratic, shifting across multiple spectrums. There's something moving under the surface. Something massive. The bridge was silent as the implications settled like cold iron in their veins. Voss exhaled slowly. Whatever it is, we can't let it leave that system. The warship hovered at the edge of the battlefield, its sensors locked on the fractured remnants of the Haraxis moon below. The planet was splitting apart in slow, painful increments, fissures of deep crimson heat rupturing across its surface as if something beneath was struggling to break free. The thing the Triarchy had sealed away was clawing its way back into existence, and if they had been terrified of it, that meant only one thing. It was worse than anything humanity had yet faced. A proximity alert blared. Kern stiffened. We've got incoming. The tactical display flared to life, marking movement. Not a fleet. Not a ship. Something else. The moon cracked open, a wound split wide across its surface, and from its depths, a shape began to rise. The bridge crew watched in silence as the impossible became real. It was not a machine, nor was it organic in any way that fit the definition of life. It was something in between, an amalgamation of shifting, self-assembling matter, a construct of ever-changing geometry that moved with deliberate purpose. It did not float or fly, it existed, rewriting the space around it, twisting the laws of physics as it ascended into the void. The air on the bridge grew dense, the pressure around them changing as if the very concept of reality strained against its presence. Kern swore under his breath. What the hell is that? No one answered because no one knew. Voss's eyes locked onto the entity, his mind racing through possibilities. The Triarchy had tried to contain it. Failed. And now, it was awake in a galaxy that did not understand it. A galaxy that was not ready. His jaw tightened. We end this now. Orders were given. The fleet repositioned, heavy artillery primed, targeting solutions locked. Fire. The command was immediate. The void erupted in fury. Rail cannons launched slugs the size of buildings, their impact shattering mountains on impact. Directed energy weapons carved through the darkness, atomic payloads igniting against the entity's form. The bombardment was relentless, the full might of Earth's fleet brought to bear. And yet, as the smoke cleared, the thing remained. It had adapted. The shape twisted, bending light itself, reforming as the wounds inflicted by humanity's greatest weapons simply rewrote themselves. The horror of realization spread across the bridge like a virus. It's learning, Kern muttered, voice barely above a whisper. The entity moved. Not with propulsion, not with force, but with an impossibility that sent ripples through space itself. One moment it was distant. The next, it was close enough that its presence was felt in the marrow of their bones. And then it spoke. Not with sound. Not with words. But with a voice that bypassed language, bypassed the limitations of the mind and embedded itself directly into thought. You are mistaken. The bridge flickered. Lights dimmed. Systems failed, only to restart in cascading patterns. Reality itself hiccuped. Voss gritted his teeth against the sudden, overwhelming weight pressing down on his thoughts. The words were not sound, yet they carried meaning beyond human comprehension. You are not the architects of this war. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The crew staggered, hands clutching at their heads as their thoughts were not their own. Images flooded their minds. A cycle. Endless. Species rising, reaching beyond their limitations, becoming too much, too ambitious. And then correction. This entity was not a weapon. It was not a mistake. It was a reset mechanism, an executor of balance that had existed before recorded time. The Triarchy had discovered it. Tried to destroy it. Failed. And now, it had found something new. Something it had never encountered before. Humanity. Voss fought against the onslaught of knowledge forcing its way into his consciousness, shoving it back with sheer will. I don't care what you are, he growled, voice raw. I don't care what you've done before. This is not your galaxy to decide. The entity did not react, but the pressure around them intensified. Kern fell to a knee, struggling to breathe. Others followed. Your kind has reached too far. As they all have before. The pattern must be maintained. Voss's hand hovered over the command console, his mind racing through every available option. Weapons had failed. Conventional tactics were meaningless. They were not fighting a fleet. They were not fighting an empire. They were fighting something beyond understanding. But if it could learn, if it could adapt, then it could be tricked. His voice was steel. You think we're the same as the others? He forced himself upright, staring directly into the shifting, incomprehensible mass before him. You think we'll be reset like all the others? Then you haven't learned a damn thing about us. He reached down, activated a sequence buried within the ship's core functions. Failsafe override. Manual detonation. Humanity doesn't lose, he said, his expression unreadable. We cheat. The Iron Dominion lurched. Emergency sirens blared. Energy levels spiked beyond critical thresholds. The bridge crew realized what was happening only seconds before the ship became a weapon. The fleet saw it too, engines roaring as they pulled away from the blast radius. The entity hesitated. It had never encountered something willing to destroy itself to win. The last thing it heard was Adrian Voss's final words before the Iron Dominion exploded with the force of a dying star. Reset this. The detonation ripped through the system, a cascading shockwave of impossible force that folded space in on itself. The entity screamed, its formless structure writhing as it was caught in the collapse, dragged back into the fractured reality it had tried to emerge from. The explosion burned like the wrath of a dying god, consuming the entire planetary field, swallowing the remnants of Haraxis Prime into nothingness. When the light faded, the entity was gone. Silence. Humanity had done what the Triarchy could not. It had survived. The fleet regrouped in the aftermath, battered but victorious. Kern stood on the bridge of the Aegis Ascendant, watching as the void where Haraxis had once been stabilized into an empty wound in space. There was no sign of the entity. No trace of Voss. Just the weight of what had been done. What had been sacrificed. He turned to the fleet, opening a channel to every remaining ship. His voice was steady. The enemy is gone. The mission is complete. He exhaled slowly. The Supreme Commander is gone. A pause. Then, he lifted his chin, eyes burning with the fire of the war that was still far from over. But humanity remains. Across the fleet, the message was clear. The war was not won. It would never be won. Not fully. The galaxy was vast, filled with things that lurked in the shadows of time. But humanity had proven one thing. It would not be erased. It would not be reset. It would endure. And if something else came for them, something that thought itself beyond reckoning, humanity would teach it the same lesson it had taught the Triarchy. Kneel, or burn.